All right, so you sent over something pretty wild, an interview with Melania Trump, and,
Yeah.
well, let's just say it took a turn nobody expected.
Right.
We've got an excerpt here that breaks down this whole thing on Spotlight Hour, and
Okay.
it's something else.
It's definitely a fascinating one. Um, and it really makes you think about how we see public figures, especially women.
Exactly. For those
Yeah.
who haven't seen it, Spotlight Hour is known for intense interviews.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Rapid-fire questions, a host who pushes his guests.
Right.
It's not for the faint of heart.
Definitely not. The piece you sent actually compares the host to a lion tamer.
Yeah.
Someone who thrives on getting a reaction.
Uh-huh. That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So you've got this setting, and in walks Melania Trump. What was the vibe at first, according to what you read?
Total composure. That's how the source describes it.
Mm-hmm.
She's described as elegant, perfect posture, that neutral expression she's known for.
Right.
Like someone who's used to being watched constantly, and it just doesn't faze her.
Interesting. So it doesn't sound like she was playing into that whole lion tamer thing.
Not at all. Not at first, anyway. The interview starts with pretty normal questions, her life after the White House, her initiatives.
Right, and the usual post-First Lady stuff.
Exactly. And Melania gives measured responses, nothing too revealing, almost like she's sizing up her opponent, biding her time.
Okay, I'm already hooked. How does the host react? He must have been trying to get more out of her.
Oh, absolutely. You can practically feel his frustration in the transcript. He starts pressing her on be best, her campaign, but not in a neutral way. It's almost like he's intentionally being dismissive, implying it wasn't a serious effort.
That's interesting because Be Best got mixed reactions, right?
Yeah.
Some thought it was too broad focus.
Exactly. And some critics said it was hypocritical given some of the, online behavior from her husband's administration.
Yeah.
So the host was definitely playing to a certain audience, the ones already skeptical of the campaign.
So he's using this existing criticism to try and get a rise out of her. Did it work?
That's where things get interesting. Instead of getting flustered or defensive, Melania flips the script completely.
Oh, wow.
She stops answering directly and challenges his assumptions head on.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. What does she say?
There's this one line that really stands out. She says, "Let me ask you something. You say people didn't see me, but tell me, what is it that you think you saw?" And just like that, the dynamic changes.
Wow, I see why you said this was a case study. She's not just answering his question, she's making him confront his own perception of her. That's bold.
It is. And the source points out that this is where the audience starts reacting. You can hear murmurs, gasps, people shifting in their seats. It's like everyone realized they were watching something unusual.
So what does the host do? He must have been thrown.
Oh, yeah.
He tries to regain control, but it's too late. The momentum has shifted. Melania continues, and she delivers this line. I understand why you ask this question. It is easier to reduce people to images to make a person into a headline, a soundbite. That is your business. I'm curious, what was the host's reaction to that?
The excerpt doesn't go into detail about his facial expressions, but it does say he stammered a bit, tried to chuckle it off, almost like he was trying to hide his surprise. It's clear he didn't expect this kind of pushback.
It's almost like she was calling out a whole media ecosystem, isn't it?
Yeah.
That tendency to oversimplify, to focus on the surface instead of digging deeper.
Absolutely. And I think that's why this interview resonated with so many people. It tapped into a frustration many of us feel with how the media operates. It's easy to get caught up in the sound bites and headlines and forget that there are real people behind them with complex stories.
It's interesting you bring up that point about complex stories because the source mentions this other public figure, a politician who was always in the headlines.
Right.
She was constantly being scrutinized for her appearance, her demeanor, even how she spoke.
Oh, yeah, I remember her. It felt like the media was always trying to fit her into a box, and when she didn't, they criticized her for it.
Exactly. And this politician, she often responded with anger, with defensiveness. And you know what? It never really worked. It just gave the media more to attack.
That's such a good point. I think what Melania did so well here was she refused to play that game. She didn't give the host the reaction he was probably hoping for.
Right.
And by doing that, she took control.
It makes you wonder if that's why this interview went viral. People were used to seeing these confrontational interviews, and then suddenly here's Melania Trump, calm and collected, turning the tables on this experienced host.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. It was unexpected, and it challenged our assumptions about who she was and how she'd respond under pressure. And it also, I think, tapped into a desire for more thoughtful, less sensationalized media coverage.
This excerpt doesn't say much about how the audience reacted afterward, but I imagine there were some strong opinions on both sides.
Oh, for sure. The source says social media blew up after it aired. Some praised Melania for her composure and her willingness to speak truth to power. Others said she was being manipulative, trying to distract from her husband's controversies.
It seems like no matter what she said, or did people already have their minds made up?
That's the tough part of being a public figure, especially now.
Hmm.
It's almost impossible to escape those existing narratives and biases.
Okay, let's get back to the interview itself. Was there anything else Melania said that stood out to you?
Well, there's another line that's really striking. The host asks if she feels like she should have done more as First Lady, and she goes, "You think I should have done more, but tell me how much is enough for you."
Mm.
It's such a clever way of exposing a double standard, don't you think?
Yeah, I do. It's like she's saying, no matter what I did, it wouldn't have been enough.
Exactly. And it gets to the core of what's expected of women in power. There's this pressure to be everything to everyone, to be perfectly competent while also being likable and relatable. It's an impossible standard to meet.
And in a way, Melania seems to be rejecting that whole thing. She's not looking for approval. She's not trying to please everyone. She's just stating her truth and letting the chips fall where they may.
And that, I think, is what makes this interview so fascinating.
Yeah.
It's like a glimpse into a different way of being in the public eye, one that doesn't rely on the usual outrage or emotional appeals.
It's almost like she's saying, I'm not playing your game. I'm going to define myself on my own terms.
And that's powerful, especially coming from someone who's often been seen as in her husband's shadow.
I'm remembering another line from the excerpt, the one where she says, I do not shout to be seen, and I do not need your approval to know my worth. That really stuck with me.
It's a powerful statement, isn't it?
Hmm.
It speaks to a quiet strength, a self-assurance that doesn't need outside validation. And it makes you wonder if sometimes the best way to challenge expectations isn't to shout louder, but to just refuse to play the game at all.
I totally agree. There's a lot there, and I think it's something we can all learn from, no matter our political views or what we think of Melania Trump herself.
I think you're right. It's a reminder that strength can come in many forms, and that sometimes the most impactful voices are the ones we least expect.
You know, it's funny. We often talk about finding your voice, speaking up for what you believe in. But this interview suggests there's also power and restraint in choosing your moments.
That's a good point. It's almost like Melania was showing a different kind of strength, one that comes from self-awareness and not getting pulled into conflict.
Exactly. And it made me think about all the times I've reacted without thinking, said something I regretted just because I felt like I had to prove myself or defend my position.
I think we've all been there. It's easy to get caught up in the moment and forget that sometimes silence can be more powerful than words.
The excerpt says that after the interview, the host of Spotlight Hour went totally silent on social media. No tweets, no statements, nothing.
That's interesting. I wonder if he was processing what happened, maybe rethinking his whole approach.
It wouldn't surprise me. He's known for being outspoken, but this time it seems like he was really caught off guard.
It's a good reminder that even the most experienced interviewers, the most confident people can be thrown when someone doesn't follow their rules.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the biggest takeaway for you, and maybe for listeners too?
I think it's realizing that strength can be shown in unexpected ways. We often think strength means being loud, assertive, dominant. But Melania's approach in this interview shows that true strength can also be composure, choosing your battles, knowing when to speak and when to stay quiet.
And maybe just as important, it's a reminder to challenge our own assumptions about people. We tend to put people in boxes based on limited information, and we miss the nuances, the complexities that make each person unique.
Absolutely. It's a call to be more open-minded, to look deeper, and try to understand the motivations, the experiences that shape how someone sees the world.
Well said. This has been a truly fascinating deep dive, and I think there's a lot here for us all to think about. Maybe we can all take a minute to reflect on the times we've judged others too quickly or felt pressure to conform to expectations that didn't feel right.
I like that. Sometimes the most valuable insights come from looking inward and examining our own biases and actions.
Thanks for joining us on this journey, and until next time, remember to keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep an open mind.